Hello, you're on the Reddit Reveals channel. She wasn't supposed to be there. Not at that church. Not in the back row, hiding behind sunglasses like I wouldn't notice her. Like I hadn't memorized her posture, the tilt of her chin, the way her arms folded when she was trying not to cry. Fallon. Still Fallon, because she never changed her name back. Still the woman who told me I was too emotional to be a man. Still the one who screamed, "You're making me hate you," the night she locked me out of our apartment with my socks in a grocery bag. And yet, there she was, at my wedding. It's been 16 months since she told me I was the reason she couldn't breathe. 15 since she started seeing someone named Travis, or maybe Trevor, I never asked. 14 since I stopped checking her Instagram and blocked her sister just to avoid seeing updates. 11 since I tore up the letter she wrote me on my birthday that began with, "I hope you're well," and ended with nothing I hadn't heard before. But only one day since I saw her cry again. And this time, it wasn't for me. It was for herself. Because I moved on. But if you think I'm telling this story to gloat, you're wrong. I'm not proud of what I'm about to say. I'm not even sure I should be saying it. But people don't believe me when I tell them she broke me first. That she ruined everything before I ever looked at someone else. Before I ever thought about walking down that aisle with another woman. So here it is. The full story. The days and nights no one saw. The conversations that left me staring at the bathroom mirror, wondering if I was insane or just unloved. It doesn't begin with a wedding. It begins with a wall. One she built, brick by brick, between the woman I loved and the stranger who told me to leave my own home. I knew something had shifted when the silence between us started lasting longer than our conversations. It wasn't the loud fights that ruined us. No slamming doors or broken dishes. It was the slow, suffocating quiet that replaced everything else. And the worst part? I was the only one trying to fill it. I'd say things just to hear if she'd respond. The faucet's leaking again. I think the neighbor's got a new dog. Did you see that article I sent you? Nothing. A nod. A shrug. Sometimes she didn't even look up. But the day she finally spoke, I almost wish she hadn't. She was sitting on the couch scrolling through her phone when she suddenly said, "You ever think maybe this was just a mistake?" Her voice was so casual, like she was asking about ordering takeout. I blinked. "What do you mean?" I asked, even though I knew exactly what she meant. She didn't answer. She just kept scrolling. That was her way. She dropped bombs, then acted like she didn't just split the ground open beneath me. I went to bed that night in the guest room, the same one I had painted for her office. The room she never used. And I didn't sleep. Not a minute. I just laid there, hands on my chest, trying to breathe through the weight of a sentence she hadn't even finished. The next morning, she made coffee. For herself. I asked her if we were okay. She said, "We're fine," like it was a chore to reassure me. Then she grabbed her keys and left. I waited all day. I didn't text her because I didn't want to be clingy. That's what she always said. "You're too clingy, Darren. It's exhausting." So I didn't text. I just waited. Like a dog by the door, ears perked at every passing car. She came home at midnight. Her lipstick was smudged. Her hair wasn't tied the way it was when she left. I didn't ask. I couldn't. I wasn't allowed to be jealous. That would make me controlling. That would make me toxic. I'd read enough self-help books to know that men like me, sensitive, open, vulnerable, were supposed to be the future of modern relationships. But no one told me what to do when that vulnerability became ammunition against me. Fallon started sleeping with her phone under her pillow. She changed her passwords. She'd step out onto the balcony to take calls in a whisper. I told myself she was just stressed, that maybe she was going through something she didn't know how to explain. But deep down, I knew. I knew in the way she no longer said, "Love you," before hanging up. I knew in the way she flinched when I reached for her hand. I knew because I could feel her leaving me, while still living in the same house. And yet, I never yelled, never slammed a door, never accused her of anything. Because the moment I got angry, she'd win. She'd say, "See, this is what I'm talking about. You're so unstable." So I swallowed everything. My hurt, my fear, my rage. I swallowed it all and let it rot inside me. Because I thought that's what love was, sacrificing your dignity just to keep someone who doesn't even want to be kept. I didn't know it yet, but Fallon had already made her decision. I was just too weak to see it. The thing about people like Fallon is that they don't leave all at once. They peel away in layers, emotionally, physically, and then logistically. I think she wanted me to be the bad guy. I think she was hoping I'd snap one day, shout something unforgivable, throw a chair, punch a wall, something she could point at and say, "See? I had to go." But I didn't. I just kept absorbing the damage like a sponge, and that made me inconvenient. She didn't want to be the villain. She wanted me to evict myself from her story. And eventually, I did. It started with her making lists. Not grocery lists, plans. I'd find notebooks on the kitchen table with things like get boxes, cancel Wi-Fi, storage unit, circled in red. I'd ask her about them, and she'd laugh it off. It's for my sister. She's moving. But her sister lived 3 states away, and Fallon hated driving more than anything. Still, I let it go. Because that's what I always did, let things go. Until I found a typed checklist, folded and hidden inside a book we used to read together. It was labeled Exit Strategy, and my name wasn't on it anywhere. I should have left right then, but I didn't. I asked her if she still loved me. I asked her if we had any chance at fixing things. She didn't answer at first. She just looked at me like I was interrupting a podcast. Then she sighed and said, "I think you love the idea of me, not the real me." I asked what that meant, and she rolled her eyes and said, "It means you don't challenge me, Darren. You just orbit around me like some sad little moon." I slept in the car that night, not because she kicked me out, yet, but because I couldn't bear to be under the same roof. I sat in the driveway, holding the steering wheel like it was going to give me advice. I played our old voicemails on speaker, the ones where she said she missed me, that she couldn't wait to see me, that I made her feel safe. I don't know why I listened to them. Maybe to remind myself I hadn't hallucinated the good parts, that they were real ones, that I wasn't completely delusional. But the next day, she handed me a box. No words, just the box. Inside were my old sweaters, my headphones, my charger, and the anniversary card I gave her last year, the one she claimed she lost. I looked up at her, trying to read her expression, but she was already walking away, like it was just another Tuesday. Like this wasn't her way of saying, "Pack your things," without making me say it out loud. So I did. I packed slowly, carefully, like I was preserving something sacred, even though nothing about it felt sacred anymore. And when I was done, I stood in the doorway, holding my keys, and asked, "Is this what you really want?" She didn't look up from her phone, didn't even blink. She just said, "I think you should go figure out who you are without me." I nodded. And that was the moment I realized something I hadn't dared admit for months. She had already figured out who she was, and I was no longer part of that picture. I didn't storm out that day. I didn't slam the door. I didn't scream or throw accusations. I did something worse. I made it easy for her. I left like a ghost, quietly, like someone who had died in the room and no one had noticed. She gave me the box, and I gave her freedom. Or maybe I gave her permission. I didn't know which one hurt more. But here's the part no one ever talks about. Leaving isn't one moment. It's not when the door closes or the engine starts. It's every hour that follows when your brain replays every conversation you should have had differently. It's wondering if she ever talks about you now like you're just a phase she outgrew. I didn't move on. Not really. I just started shrinking. I stopped texting mutual friends. I avoided the places she used to love. I deleted every picture where she was smiling and left the ones where she wasn't, so I could convince myself she'd been unhappy all along. And yet, I couldn't hate her. That was the cruel part. I wanted to. I wanted to paint her as a villain and move on like a man with dignity. But all I could do was miss her. Like a fool, I kept remembering the smell of her hair after showers, the way she snorted when she laughed too hard, the way she used to fall asleep with her leg draped over mine like a seatbelt. Stupid details that didn't matter anymore, but still came uninvited at 3 a.m. I found a cheap studio apartment above a laundromat. The walls were thin and the floor creaked, but it was mine. I told myself it was temporary, that I just needed space to clear my head. But I never unpacked all the boxes. I didn't hang anything on the walls. I lived like I was waiting for something, some apology, some moment where she'd call and say, "I made a mistake. Come home." I wanted it so bad it made me physically sick. And yet, the phone stayed silent. Weeks turned into months. I went to therapy. The guy had soft eyes and too many sweaters. He told me I was grieving the idea of her, not the real her, that the version I missed never truly existed. I told him I understood. Then I went home and cried into a hoodie she once stole from me and left behind. A hoodie that still smelled like her even after 8 washes. Then, one day, I ran into someone. No, not in a dating app, soul reconnection kind of way. I mean literally. I ran into her at the drugstore. I was reaching for cold medicine. She bumped my arm, said sorry, then looked up and froze. Her name was Elena. She had a bruise on her wrist and mascara smudged under her left eye. And when I asked her if she was okay, she laughed like I'd just told a joke, and said, "You sound like him." Before. I didn't know what she meant. Not fully. But we ended up sitting in the parking lot for almost 2 hours, just talking. She had just left a man who made her feel invisible. She said I reminded her what softness sounded like. And I didn't know what to say to that. I didn't know how to be someone else's answer when I hadn't even finished being someone's mistake. But she gave me her number anyway. Wrote it on a napkin. I kept it in my wallet. Not because I was ready, but because for the first time in months, someone had seen me. Really seen me. And that was the beginning of something I didn't realize yet. Fallon wasn't going to be the last woman to break my heart, but she was going to be the first one to regret it. It didn't happen all at once. Fallon noticing I wasn't orbiting her anymore. No, it started in the smallest, strangest ways. Like the way she suddenly watched my Instagram stories, even though she never used to care about what I posted. Or how her sister, who had unfollowed me during the split, quietly added me back. Little digital footprints, quiet as snow, telling me she was looking, but saying nothing. Meanwhile, I kept pretending I wasn't still bruised. I buried myself in routine. I took up running, even though I hated cardio. I started volunteering at the animal shelter on Sundays just so I wouldn't go home to an empty apartment that echoed too much. Elena and I texted sometimes, but I never let it become anything serious. I was afraid of ruining someone else just because I hadn't finished fixing myself. Then one evening, I got a text from a number that was burned into my memory. "I saw you the other day. You look different. Lighter. Happy." No hello. No name. Just that. Fallon. And the worst part? My stomach dropped like I'd just seen her walk through the door. My body still hadn't unlearned her. I stared at the message for 10 minutes, typing and deleting, typing and deleting. Eventually, I just replied, "I am." That was it. No punctuation. No invitation. I figured that would be the end of it. But it wasn't. A week later, I walked into my favorite cafe, the one I found after she left, and there she was, sitting at the back table. Same sunglasses. Same smug calm. Like she wasn't breaking an unspoken rule by showing up unannounced. "I was just in the area," she said, as if this wasn't the place I had moved on in. As if she hadn't picked the one place I once told her I came to when I needed peace. I didn't sit. I asked her what she wanted. She didn't flinch. "I wanted to see you. That's all." I should have left. I almost did. But then she said, "Do you hate me?" And that broke me in a way I didn't expect. Because I realized in that moment, I didn't. Not anymore. And that was worse than hating her. It meant I had really let go. I sat down. Against my better judgment. I let her talk. She told me about the man after me. How she thought he was more her speed. How he made her feel excited and alive, but also disposable. How the same chaos she once craved eventually made her feel like furniture in someone else's life. "He didn't remember my birthday," she whispered. "You always did." I didn't smile. I didn't reach for her hand. I just nodded and said, "I hope you find what you're looking for." She stared at me like I was someone she didn't recognize. Like I had become a version of myself that existed only in her regrets. And maybe that was true. Maybe Fallon wasn't crying because she lost me. Maybe she was crying because she finally saw who I'd become and realized she'd never be able to touch that version again. Fallon didn't text me again for a while after that cafe, and I thought maybe that was it. Maybe the strange chapter had closed, finally, with her eyes glassy and her voice low, saying she was sorry without using the word. But people like Fallon don't let go when it's appropriate. They let go when it's convenient. And I had just become inconvenient in a new way. 2 months later, I posted a photo. It wasn't even anything dramatic, just me, standing by a window with a mug of coffee. Elena's hand was barely visible in the corner of the frame, resting on my shoulder. Soft, casual, honest. And Fallon saw it. I know she did, because exactly 23 minutes after I hit post, she called me. Not texted. Called. I let it ring. Once, twice, all the way to voicemail. My heart was racing, not with excitement this time, but with something closer to fear. Not the kind where you're in danger. The kind where you feel like the past just sat up in its grave and smiled at you. I didn't listen to the voicemail right away. I waited until after midnight. I had to be alone for it, in the dark, where her voice would hit harder. Like it always did. She said, I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from, but I saw your photo, and I can't stop thinking about it. You look real again, like the man I thought I wanted before everything got complicated." She paused, long enough that I thought it ended. Then she added, "I was wrong about us. And I think maybe you were too." I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even respond. I just laid there, watching the shadows move across my ceiling like waves, wondering how it was possible for someone who shattered you to sound like comfort. The next day, she showed up at my apartment. I don't know how she found it. I never told her the address. I never posted a full view. But Fallon was clever when she wanted to be. Too clever. She stood outside the building with a paper bag of croissants like this was some kind of soft reunion. She smiled when I opened the door, like we were still us. "I figured you didn't block me for a reason," she said. I didn't invite her in. She didn't care. She started talking like no time had passed. About how she broke things off with the guy after me. About how empty the apartment felt. How she missed my playlists. My jokes. My way of folding the towels in thirds instead of halves. Stupid details, weaponized nostalgia. Then she said it. "I don't want to be the one who ruins your next relationship, Darren. I want to know if there's still space in your heart that I didn't completely burn down." I asked her why now. Why after all this time? She looked away, then back at me with the kind of look that always used to undo me. "Because you're finally the man I always hoped you'd be," she said. "And I can't stand the thought that someone else gets that version of you." There it was. Not love. Possession. She didn't miss me. She missed owning the part of me that no longer belonged to her. And in that moment, I realized something that made my hands stop shaking and my breath steady. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need closure. I just needed to keep the door closed. So I told her, gently, "Fallon, I'm happy now. And not in a revenge kind of way. In a quiet, private, boring way that you would hate." She stood there for a while, eyes blinking, lips tight. Then, without saying anything else, she dropped the bag of croissants on the doorstep, turned, and walked away. But as she reached the corner, she looked back. And that's when I saw it. Not regret, not longing, but panic. Because for the first time since I met her, she wasn't in control anymore. Fallon didn't reach out for a while after that. And I should have known that silence didn't mean surrender. It meant recalibration. That's how she operated. She never accepted outcomes she didn't orchestrate. And the fact that I had closed the door on her, both literally and metaphorically, wasn't something she would just absorb and move on from. Not Fallon. At first, it was subtle. A message from a random account. No profile picture. "She doesn't really love you. You're just her rebound." Then another, days later. "She'll leave you like the last one did." I blocked each one. Ignored them. But in the pit of my stomach, I knew. Fallon had never needed a name to throw punches. She only needed a target. Then Elena started noticing things. First it was small, someone watching her outside her yoga studio. Then the strange flower deliveries with no sender name. One day, she came home and told me a woman had asked her in the parking lot if she was dating Darren. She laughed when she said it, brushing it off, but there was fear behind her eyes. And that fear grew when she found her car keyed the following week. That night, I didn't sleep. I just sat by the window, the same way Fallon used to when she was angry and silent, watching the world move without her. I thought about calling her. I thought about screaming into the phone, asking if she was seriously that far gone. But that's what she wanted. She wanted a reaction. She wanted evidence. She wanted to be relevant again. So instead, I took Elena's hand and told her everything. Not the edited version I told others. I told her the full thing. How Fallon used to keep a record of my mistakes, literal notes in her phone titled Emotional Lapses. How she'd spend hours listing the ways I was emotionally underdeveloped. How she once recorded me crying after a fight, just so she could play it back and mock my voice. I told her how I stayed and why I stayed, and how long it took for me to believe that staying wasn't the same as loving. And when I was done, Elena didn't flinch. She didn't pity me either. She just nodded and said, "That explains why you flinch when I raise my voice, even by accident." And I think that's when I knew. This was the woman I was meant to heal with. Not through. With. But healing doesn't come without relapses. And Fallon was a relapse in human form. It was 3 nights later when I found her sitting on the steps of my building. No umbrella, even though it was raining hard enough to soak her hair into stringy ropes around her face. She looked up at me like I had been the one who left. "I just want to talk," she said. voice low and shivering, but not from the cold. I told her that was never a good idea, that we both knew where that kind of talking led. I'm not here to cause trouble, she said, and then immediately added, but if you're going to act like I'm dangerous, maybe I should be. That's when I knew something had cracked. Fallon had always been cold, but this was new. This wasn't calculated anymore. It was chaotic, emotional, off script, and that scared me more than anything else. Because if she was no longer the director of her own behavior, there was no telling what came next. I backed away, slowly, closed the door, double-locked it, called a friend who used to be a lawyer and asked him what my options were. He told me to start documenting everything. So I did. I saved the messages, photographed the flowers. I made copies of everything I could, and then I sat down at my kitchen table with a cup of black coffee and tried to breathe. Tried to remember that this wasn't my fault, that I didn't cause this, that walking away wasn't betrayal. It was survival. But still, in the silence of that night, I caught myself whispering, please, just let me go. Because I wasn't sure she ever really had. The police report wasn't dramatic. I didn't want to press charges. I just wanted distance. Space to breathe without checking over my shoulder. I filed for a restraining order quietly, with the help of my lawyer friend. The judge granted it. Fallon didn't contest. And that surprised me. For once, she didn't show up to perform. No monologue, no defense. Just silence. It was the most unsettling peace I'd ever felt. For weeks, I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. I expected some last grand act, a letter, a rumor, something dramatic. But it never came. Instead, Fallon vanished the way some people do when they finally realize they have nothing left to take from you. And I should have felt triumphant. But what I felt was something better. Stillness. For the first time in years, my life wasn't being narrated by someone else's disappointment. I wasn't auditioning for affection. I wasn't explaining who I was or defending what I felt. I was just living. Quietly, imperfectly, honestly. Elena stayed. She never tried to fix me. She didn't ask for perfection. She just sat with me on the bad days and laughed with me on the good ones. We started cooking together, grocery shopping, making playlists that didn't include songs I once ruined with memories of someone else. We made a home, not just a place to escape to. Then one morning, it happened. I was standing on the church steps, not as a groom, not yet, but as a man who finally knew he deserved to love and be loved in return. Elena was inside, helping her cousin set up for the rehearsal. It was sunny, too sunny for November. I remember thinking that even the weather felt like permission, and that's when I saw her. Fallon, standing across the street, wearing a dark coat and sunglasses. Same stance, same chin tilted upward, but there was no smugness in her face this time. No calculation, just stillness, like she had finally stopped fighting gravity. Our eyes met for a second, long enough to know she wasn't there to cause trouble, long enough to understand that she had come to say goodbye, in her own, strange way. She didn't wave, didn't approach. She just gave me the smallest smile and mouthed two words, "You're free." And then she turned and walked away. That was the last time I ever saw her. I married Elena 6 months later. Our wedding wasn't perfect. The cake melted. The sound system cut out during the first dance. But none of that mattered. Because as I looked at her, standing barefoot in the grass, laughing with cake on her chin, I realized something Fallon never let me believe. Love doesn't have to hurt to feel real. It doesn't have to be a performance, or a punishment, or a prize. Sometimes it's just peace. And that's what I have now. Not revenge. Not regret. Peace. And God, it's beautiful.